I bring episode 9, My Father's Tales, entry 9. And before I get into the tale of the day, I just wanted to say that please understand that as I share these stories, I am trying very hard to keep them as honest as possible. I am trying to tell them honestly the way things really were. I don't like it when people tend to rewrite history. And it is kind of a tendency to do that when you lose people you love and cherish and you miss them. And you only want to remember the happy stories and the positive stories. And of course, that's great. But when you're retelling someone the stories of someone, I think it's important to me, I'll say, to make it as honest as I can. I'm telling these through my eyes, through my life within the family, with from my spot on the family tree, the food chain, as it were, my spot down the line. So all I can do is tell it from my perspective, obviously, and I'm I want it to be to be accurate. Excuse me, and not glorified. My father was flawed and he was imperfect, but he gave so much and did so much, and these stories are fun for me to tell. And it's nice to have this to do while we're in COVID-19 lockdown in April of 2020 to revisit these interesting tales of my father. But what I want you to also know is I'm the kind of person that would never betray anything that my father told me in confidence. And he knew that he had flaws and frailties, and we had very wonderful conversations about that, things that he shared with me that I would never publicly share because they were private conversations that he shared with me, not to be shared. They were just shared with me. And that is my creed and my motto, that he had that. He had that. It's like if it's something like I'm doing now that are these fun stories that he told openly, are things that I know he would get a kick out of hearing again and love the fact that I'm sharing them so that they can be kept for Kate, his great granddaughter, to hear and to know him in that way. That's all great and good, but I would never betray anyone's confidence. If something that someone told me in private, please keep this as a confidence. I do. I never betray people's confidences, and I'm not betraying anything with my father. I just wanted to put that out there so that it is understood that these are all stories that he would love that I'm sharing. Nothing overly private that he ever shared with me that he would maybe not want trotted out in public. And I hold that same creed, personal conviction with everyone in my life. But my dad always had a shop at home as well as at his office. And I loved it when he would whistle because my dad could be moody as the day is long. He really could. He could have a thundercloud hanging over him for whatever reason, um, like we all do as adults. And your children don't know and shouldn't know what troubles you. But my dad also had a temper, and he let you know a lot of times when he was what it was that he was unhappy about. But what I loved would be to wake up and he would be whistling, whether it would be in the house doing stuff or from when I was younger, he basically had a workshop, and then later on he added a lot of expensive machinery to his home shops, so he could do things there. But I always loved that. It was like I can't whistle, and so I loved hearing him whistle or sing. He always had music playing when he was working. He always had radio going, and my dad was very precise in his work. And Gerry reminded me of this great story when he and I were talking about the stories that I would share. And I want to bring Gerry in to some of these because he has a lot of great stories about my dad too. But he was helping my dad add an addition on to my parents' house at Lake Whitney. And they were working on the foundation. They were building on to the back of the house. And and my dad was very big on square, plumb, level. And he had the square, he had the plumb, he had the level, and so I learned about it was through him. Gerry and I built several houses. We've had several properties and several custom homes from the ground up. And my dad would always show up during construction unannounced to check their work. He wanted our place to be square and plumb and level, and he did just that. And so he was he was a mathematician. He was very precise. He did instrumentations. He had to be precise. It mattered. So they're working away on the foundation, and up in the trees, not very close to my parents' property, was this man, this old guy that my dad knew from elsewhere. He actually knew the guy's brother better than the guy that lived out there. But he knew him too. And so this old guy was nosy. He was just like a busybody, and he always wanted to nose into other people's business. And he had wasn't a mobile home. It was a trailer, and hidden up in these trees. But this guy could make a circle. He could leave his place, drive down by the lake, then come up by my parents' property was on the corner. So anyone that drove by could see what they were doing there on this addition they were building from the street. They could see what they were doing. So he stopped. He pulled up, and it would just irritate Daddy because this old guy always had an opinion on everything, unsolicited. So he's watching and just watching, and he asked, what they were doing. And Daddy didn't tell him. I mean, it's like, oh, we're just, building on we got some work going on here, and he wouldn't say that they were actually building an addition. And this foundation they were working on, Daddy had to level out and was checking. And if it wasn't level, then he would have Gerry do stuff to help make it level. And they worked together as this really great team Gerry helped on the entire lake house and on the addition that they were working on that day. And I needed him, Gerry, here to tell it because he can tell it so funny, and Daddy could tell it really funny too. And so this guy was leaning out never got out, never offered to help. Let me help I'll move while I'm here. I'll just move some materials for you. Oh no, he just stared and watched. And so he's watching, and Daddy's checking the level. And he says it's a little low on one end. And not only did Daddy not tell him, what they were building, but he never reacted to that. I don't believe oh gee, thanks for telling me, because the fact that this old guy was telling my dad how to do that, Daddy had no respect for that. If you had the knowledge yourself, and if this old guy had ever built anything, then yeah, okay. My dad wasn't too good or too proud to take criticism or to say, hey, you're right. You know what? I do need to bring that up a little bit, but not this guy. So my dad could be very stubborn, very, very stubborn. Gee, I wonder where I get that. But my dad would go to work very early. He wanted to get there before anyone else. And the shifts started. He started people very early anyway. And they started early and they got off early. But he got there earlier, and he would sit and read his paper. And I know because there were times when I would, as a kid, go to work with him, and my mother would be gone, or there would be a need for me to be there. And he always drank his very strong coffee. He drank it black, very, very strong. I couldn't drink his coffee. It was too strong for me. But he would pour it into a cup. He always used a cup and saucer. He would pour the coffee into the saucer and then sip it from that until it cooled. I always thought that was so funny, crazy, weird. But that was his way of reading the paper, starting his day. But he would enter the building from the back, and my dad had this back office where he would read the paper and stuff, and then a front office where he did the brainiac work. It took place in the front office where he could close the door and be, concentrate on things he needed to design. And this one morning, he came where the office was there in Fort Worth, Texas. The neighborhood began to change, and so he saw this guy. He parked at the back of the building, and there was an alleyway back there between houses and an industrial area. And he got a glimpse of this guy, and he didn't react. He just went on in, and he knew the guy opened the door and followed him in. And as he came in, my dad didn't even turn around. He just reached over as he walked past a machine and quietly picked up a pipe. And the guy, as my dad got up near where the Coke machine and where the little food items were that they had back there, he told my dad to give him all the money from the machine. And my dad just he said he just turned. My dad wasn't bragging. He just told the story that he had to tell the police. He just turned around and popped the guy in the leg. He didn't want to really, kill the guy or anything, but he wanted to make him where he was not ambulatory, so that he could call the police. And he just popped him in the legs, and he was not ambulatory. And my dad just went over, picked up the phone, and other people told this, that he just picked up the phone and called the police, sat down and had his coffee while the guy was laying there, incapacitated. But my dad was like that. I'm going to talk more about the shop, but he would, this was before I was born, but they were at the park one day. There's a park called Trinity Park in Fort Worth, Texas, and they were there he was there with my mom, my sister, and this woman started screaming that, grab him, he stole my purse. And my dad just happened to be at the right place at the right time, and he grabbed the guy, ran past him, and he grabbed him and cold-cocked him and got the woman's purse back, and he held him there until the police came, and the guy's like, don't hit me anymore. And they wrote this story up in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram about my dad saving the day for this woman with her purse. That was the kind of man my dad was. Don't mess with my dad. But back to the company where he was, the company in the beginning, primarily in the beginning, they did instrumentation they worked with oil fields for West Texas, and he would have to go out there periodically. But he did a lot of design for instrumentations they used out in the field. And these trucks would come in, excuse me, and they were sleek, and they were almost like buses without windows on the sides, and they looked very Art Deco. They really were very cool. And he designed a lot of the instrumentation and then it would go into production for these trucks for the oil fields of West Texas. And I used to have a picture of myself sitting on one of those trucks. They were bright blue. They were really, really very pretty. But my dad, when he went into the Army for World War II, I didn't exist, but there is according to the GI Bill, when you come back to work after the war, you get your old job back and your old pay and everything. And there's actually a line in an Elvis Presley movie about that. My sister was a big Elvis fan, and she took me to see a movie called Blue Hawaii, and then we saw it 50 million times after that together. And I still like that movie, actually. But there was a line in it where Elvis Presley says, I get my old job back, according to the GI Bill. And when my dad came back, my dad, being a really so talented in his field, he was always the boss in my life, and he went pretty much from being an apprentice to being heading up the teams. And so when he got back, he got a job back at the company, but someone else had his title, and he went to battle for that, and he got that back according to the GI Bill. And he also realized when he got his first paycheck that he didn't get his old pay back, so he went to battle for that, and he got that too. But the thing about the where he worked, in the back office where I always came in, where you had the Coke machine stayed the same forever. Coke never replaced it. It stayed the same. It was an honor system. You opened a door and you pulled the Cokes out. And but they worked with different vendors. One was Tom's, and they bought uh, snack foods from Tom's, and candy, which there's another entry I can do about Halloween and candy from Tom's. But there was a jar, it's big like a canister really, where the candy went in, some of the smaller candies went into that, and it has the Tom's logo on it, and the lid was bright red, and that was where I always went. I grabbed a load because it was a variety, and I'd grab all this candy out of the Tom's jar. And when he retired, I said, "Oh, be sure to grab that Tom's canister, that glass canister, because I love it. We have to have it." I've known that canister my whole life, and I had. And he did. He grabbed it, and he got the top is the red had kind of worn off and looked kind of like when paint kind of begins to come off, and it kind of changes colors. Anyway, when my mom passed away, he gave it to me, and I have it now. It has traveled with me since then, and it's traveled all over the place with me, and it is sitting in our kitchen right now on the counter, filled with different things. It's filled with granola, with breakfast bars, but it's also filled with Junior Mints and Reese's peanut butter cups. But my dad was stubborn. He could be very uh, temperamental. He had a temper that he would demonstrate. My dad, let me tell you, used salty language, and he used it in front of everyone. He was honest like that. If you didn't like his language, hit the road, move on, because that's who he was. And he was true to himself in that way. He was what he was, and I use the salty language myself. And while he was flawed, and he certainly wasn't perfect, he did so many things that I need to share, and I'm going to share, and I hope that I'm doing them justice, but I am trying to do them honestly without rewriting my father's tales.